Welcome everyone to our higher education and webinar series. This is being presented by Symmetry, Autodesk, and this week our guest speaker is Northeastern University. So thank you, Northeastern, for joining. So today's webinar will be recorded, like Nick has said, and it'll be emailed out to you within a few days. We'll have a Q&A session at the end, and you can drop your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen at any time you want as well. For today's webinar, we are thrilled to welcome Sarah Brown from Northeastern, and she will be kicking off our interview round, which we are super excited to talk to her about. We're going to do a nice little overview and some introductions, and then we will also be talking about the Northeastern case study. Q&A will be at the end, and like I said before, put your questions in the Q&A while you think of them so you don't forget them for later. All right, so first up, we're going to do some introductions. My name is Rachel Beaudry. I'm going to be one of your hosts today. I work at Autodesk as a customer success manager. Before that, I worked in construction as a general contractor, worked in the field for about a decade as a superintendent. And then I'm going to hand it off to Sarah to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Sarah Brown. I'm the BIM Technology Manager in the Planning, Real Estate, and Facilities Department at Northeastern University. I think we go a little bit into my background in a few questions from now, but super high level. My background's mostly architecture, capital projects management, and now BIM.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. And then our other panelist today is Nick. So Nick, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, thanks, Rachel. Nick Scalone, the Director of Program Management here at Symmetry. I work in our owner services business unit here, so dealing mostly with our owner-operator clients. I also have a background in architecture, and before joining Symmetry, I worked for a real estate developer for 6 years as a project architect and developer. So a lot of experience in the owner representation world, and I moved into this role because I was really excited to be able to help more owners just build more efficiently.
Awesome.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Nick.
All right. So yeah, we're going to do some introductions on each of the firms joining. So just to introduce Symmetry, if you're not aware, we're a global digital delivery and operations management consulting firm, helping our clients to build and operate smarter and more efficiently. We have over 1,000 employees worldwide, and 750 of them are dedicated consultants with backgrounds in architecture, engineering, product development, construction, manufacturing, and even on the facilities management and asset management space. We're excited to be here. We partner with technology providers like Autodesk, Esri, Aptura, and IBM to bring the latest innovations to our clients. And then we have our own software stack that's built on top of those partnerships. So again, we have a lot of in-house developers.
So a brief overview of Northeastern. I like to describe it as a career-oriented university. We're really well known for our co-op program. University is based out of Boston, but we actually now have global campuses across North America as well as London. The Boston campus in particular, which is kind of the main campus, is on 73 acres, 168 buildings that we manage, and just actually recently achieved Arboretum status, which is something that's been very exciting for us to explore as a campus.
So Autodesk is here to help you guys tell stories and inspire leaders in architecture, engineering, construction, manufacturing, entertainment, and design through our Design and Make initiative. We're here to help you design and make anything that you can imagine.
All right, so we're going to kick off now and move into the interview phase with Sarah Brown. She's the BIM Technology Manager for Northeastern, as she just said. I'm going to stop the share and we focus more on a face-to-face conversation. But please, as we're conversing, if you have questions about a certain topic, please drop it in the chat. If it Rachel and Amanda, the other panelists, they'll chime in if it's a question that's directly related to the topic. I think it'd be great to talk about it as we are discussing the topic, and then you'll see the conversation will slowly move on to the great work that Northeastern's been doing. All right, gotta pull up my interview notes here. Okay, so Sarah, BIM technology manager, right? What does that mean? What does it mean to you? What do you think it means to Northeastern University?
Sure. So just at a base level, because I'm not sure who's joining us today, BIM stands for Building Information Modeling, but I also really like to sub that M modeling out for management as well, because BIM really provides a backdrop for managing a portfolio of buildings. And I was brought on last year as the BIM technology manager to essentially overhaul. Sorry, is there a little feedback? Here's some feedback. Okay, must have been me. To essentially overhaul our existing conditions documentation for the campus. So a lot of departments, including PREF, which is planning, real estate, and facilities, make use of these existing conditions resources like floor plans. And over time, they have just kind of degraded. And so part of what I have come on to do is to overhaul those and really develop a new system for them. A typical BIM manager role that you might hear about at an architecture firm is a more shorter term role. They kind of help with over the course of a project, and then they're moving on to a new project. But at owner's side at a university, the BIM manager has a lot more of a role in longevity, long-term development and maintenance, and kind of managing the foreseeable future of the models and conditions we're collecting.
So you would say that your role, Sarah, really transcends just one specific discipline or phase, right? You really have to be kind of focused on the full life cycle of the information, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And you said that you were part of PREF, right? Which stands for Planning, Real Estate, and Facilities Team, right?
Yep.
And so, what do you for those of you joining and not familiar with the ownership side, what does the PREF team really do at Northeastern?
So PREF is a department that by that name has actually only come around in the past couple of years. We've kind of joined up a few major groups whose work is very closely entwined, including facilities, campus operations, trades and services, campus planning, so design project managers, and basically everyone who helps to manage Northeastern's growing portfolio of buildings, even like groundskeeping and maintenance and things like that. So really everyone that works together to manage all of these buildings and their life cycle, that we all kind of make up PREF together.
So it sounds like you have a lot of stakeholders you have to contend with then, right?
Definitely. A lot of interest in the work that we're doing as well.
Nice. And you said previously and your the introduction page that your background is in architecture. You want to kind of elaborate on where you started and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So yes, my background is in architecture. I actually went to Northeastern, so clearly I have some attachment to the university. But I've worked for a few local architecture firms in Boston, Stantec and Sasaki, to name a few. And I was a capital projects manager for several years, which sort of led me down this path because those are now the folks that I am really doing the work that I do for. I'm developing resources for them. And so it helps to have done that job and to know exactly what they need to really format what I do to suit their roles.
So it kind of sounds like you get to tell your old boss what to do now. Is that correct?
Not in so few words, but I definitely get to work with a lot of, I work with them and I help them make their jobs easier. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's also, my own background. That's why I moved into this role. I really wanted to help support those teams because I knew that from the ownership side, they get to dictate a lot. And so I think there's that nice play there. And so again, you said you came from an architecture and design background to now BIM technology manager. So what was that transition like? And why were you interested in moving into that space?
Yeah, I really realized that I was more interested in the technology used to make projects happen than the actual design or execution of the projects themselves. Um, and I really like the technology, and I like being on the back end and improving those resources. So I kind of leveraged the other skills I had between architecture and project management, to move into BIM management, and honestly just had a really great mentor who was willing to give me a chance and help me develop those skills, to the point where I was able to run this program for Northeastern myself.
Nice. And so how is that, how has working with the owner changed your viewpoint, right? Do you think you have more power now, or do you think it's more difficult?
It's definitely there's more ownership of the data. We kind of get to set the rules of engagement. Um, and when it comes to, we're working with outside firms and outside groups, we kind of get to dictate how we want things to go so that it will serve our long-term goals, which is really nice. But it is a very long range view that, takes a lot of strategizing to plan for, because a project doesn't just last a few years and then it's over and you move on. It's all about that longevity of data.
Right, you're stuck with it.
Mhm.
And so before we move a bit more into your role, just generally speaking, what gets you out of bed in the morning? What excites you about, the position that you're in and where the industry is headed?
Yeah, like I said, it's always the technology for me. I'm really excited about how technology is going to change architecture. I think it has changed architecture to a huge degree in the last 50 years, and I think the next 50 years it will change even more. And I really think, particularly for architects, but for everyone who does anything with architecture, you have to get on the ride or be left behind. So that's my big goal, is just to always be on the ride.
Nice. And so before we hopped on, we sent out a survey to you to talk about, what you think is most important with BIM in digital operations. It's a poll we're going to send out at the very end of this presentation too, but I'm going to quickly go back to the deck to showcase, what was most important for you. So it sounded like the top three things were integrated campus management, lifecycle BIM, and that collaboration and remote access. What are these aligned to what your goals are for the campus? And do you want to just elaborate a bit more on what you are trying to accomplish this year, next year, over the next 3 years?
Sure, yeah. So that top one, integrated campus management, that's a huge goal that I'm working on, as well as the greater team that I'm a part of. That all comes back to the single source of truth, right? So much of my department's work is informed by data that is all really related. And the underlying trend of all that data is that it has a physical manifestation, whether it's how many work requests were completed in this building, or how much capital funding was spent in this building, or how many AV setups do we have in this building. All of that has a physical location. And so providing a backdrop to that data is a huge asset and a way to just bring everything together in what I like to say is a physical location.
Okay.
And then lifecycle BIM is really kind of a two-part answer for us. On the back end, the life cycle of BIM is really about data longevity and accuracy, and kind of facilitating the campus management that goes on behind the scenes in pref. But there's also a front end component to that life cycle BIM, which is, building life cycles, scheduled maintenance, and kind of the life cycle of the building that BIM is enabling you to support.
Nice. A lot different than, right, than working on a capital project, and then, as soon as construction starts, your role's minimized, and then as soon as, closeout happens, you might not ever see the building again unless there's litigation, right? Which is the bad
Exactly.
reason to be called back to it.
So
Right.
Sarah,
Yeah. Our life cycle is much longer. Hmm.
Yeah.
yeah, I was just going to say, what do you think is what are some of the most important parts within the life cycle that you're talking about to have your BIM already up for everyone to look at?
That's a good question. I think the most important parts would be obviously the accuracy and the availability of that data. So not only making sure that you are capturing everything, but making sure that the people who need to see that can see it and can access it and can edit it when need be. And just keeping it a really live source of data rather than the kind of historic floor plans and historic documents that you might expect to see as a resource at a university.
So treating it more of a living, breathing document that's always updated instead of something that someone's just putting on the shelf and reviewing every so many years.
Exactly.
And then moving on, to dive a little bit deeper into what you talked about. You said previously that a major goal of yours in the campus was to move from a 2D to a 3D world. Was that an initiative that you started, or was it part of a larger program that you were brought on? Can you just walk us through a little bit about how it came about?
Sure. So that it really came from a desire to catch up to the industry standard, but more than that is to kind of even surpass the industry standard, particularly for owner's side BIM usage specifically. I think a lot of this is done when I say industry standard, I'm kind of referring to the architecture industry, the AEC industry. Owner's side is still much earlier on, I think, in the engagement with these resources. And so we really want to be at the forefront of that and utilize it as much as we can, but also because it enables us to work so much more in sync with the AEC industry that we are working with constantly. Architects are in BIM and Revit, and engineers and even GCs, so we should be as well. And the group that I'm a part of, which is the Technology Solutions Group, which is under PREF, kind of got a hierarchy there. They're really the driving force in overhauling that resource across the departments, and in bringing all of this data together and making sure that we're keeping up to and surpassing the industry standard.
Great. And what sort of benefits are you hoping to capture from getting your existing conditions into the 3D world?
Yeah, I think it's like I kind of keep harkening back to availability and accuracy of information. A lot of the users that we interact with aren't necessarily comfortable reading a floor plan. And the 3D resources can make that data available to a wider audience and just more palatable to more people in a way that they can understand and make use of.
Great. And we've gone down similar journeys ourselves here at Symmetry, but can you walk us through what that journey has been like for yourself, in digitizing your campus?
Yeah, it is one that we are still working on right now. This has been a project for maybe 2 or 3 years now. We've kind of been working on this, maybe more even in the background before I was even aware of it, to be honest. But it's getting everyone on board. It's engaging stakeholders, understanding the needs of all of these many parties that I keep referencing of people who want to see this data. And then once we kind of get everyone on board, it's, well, how do we make this happen? And how do we make it usable for everyone and attainable, and also something that we will be able to keep using, and we won't just kind of capture it once and then, like Rachel said, put it on the shelf, because the value comes from the living documents that we're able to keep moving forward forever. So it's gathering this data, it's processing and making this data available to the users, and then it's managing over the long term, strategizing how we're going to manage this data.
Sarah,
what sort of for other? Oh, sorry, Rachel.
Sorry, I was going to say, what group of people has benefited the most from this project that probably has surprised everyone? Like, what group within your department has benefited the most?
So I'll give a 2-part answer to that, because I think the group that has benefited the most is not necessarily surprising to me.
Okay.
Which would be probably our internal projects, our internal design and construction, small projects group. I say small projects, they work on quite large projects, but that's kind of what their title is.
Yep.
And so we have been transitioning them from AutoCAD to Revit, and which from my perspective has been a huge boon to their workflow. Obviously there's a learning curve to Revit and to BIM, but the speed at which they are able to do their work and the accuracy that they can rely on from these documents just means that there's less things that come up during construction, fewer surprises. It's easier to kind of plan out those projects and how things are going to go when you know you can rely on your resources. The second half of my answer would be the group that surprised me the most is actually not in my department, but it's the colleges and the other departments in the university. And as I kind of speak to people about gathering these resources and the actual process that it takes to become a BIM enabled campus, the more people I meet who just want to be involved, who want to see the outcome of this work and have it made available to them and really can see how it would be useful for them in their day-to-day work, and far beyond the people that I expected who would want to make use of it. So that has been really exciting to see how many people want access to it.
Nice.
And then just to finish off the scanning and modeling aspect of it, for the other campuses that are viewing live or going to watch the recording, are there any pain points and lessons that you've learned over the past year that you want to share so that other people could, proactively try to avoid them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say the biggest lesson learned for me has been how to balance implementation and rollout. So I think the goal was always to make this available to people as soon as we could, to get people excited about it. That's how you're able to get kind of stakeholder buy-in as well, and the kind of support and funding needed to do something like this at such a large scale. You have to pitch the project, but the doing it slowly and making sure you have your strategy in place and really understand how this will impact people as you roll it out really makes a big difference in people's willingness to accept and take on a very new workflow and resource. So how do you roll out temporary resources when you know that it's not kind of the final product? How do you get people on board with something they can't use yet? How do you kind of pitch something that will impact their ROI when you won't see that for a couple of years? So all those kind of things about balancing how much you're sharing, how much you're making accessible, and how much you are kind of how much you're letting them see and how much they are able to do.
Yeah, it's got to be a balance for sure. And so now that you're collecting all this information, right, where are you putting it? Are you putting it into a common data environment? Do you have a common data environment currently?
So on the small scale, for just in my world, in BIM world, we use ACC for our common data environment. That's where we host all of our kind of base model existing conditions resources where people can go and view the models, as well as kind of the active projects that are being worked on. We are working towards a much broader, what I would still call a common data environment, for kind of, as I was mentioning, those bigger data resources that all tie back into BIM. So that's basically our big goal for the next several years now, is to take what I'm working on, what the GIS team is working on, the data analytics team, all these folks, space management, and really get that into, like, that's the valuable common data environment that we're looking for, to kind of like sit above, a level above ACC, and make everything really visible and connected.
Nice, and that goes back to what you mentioned before about that connected campus, right?
Exactly.
And you said you were using ACC. What led what were the decision factors that led you to want to use the Autodesk Construction Cloud to be hosting the models of the campus?
I mean, from my perspective, I'd say it's kind of the industry standard. It for that resource for Autodesk and for AutoCAD and Revit. It's hard to go wrong with ACC. I think the cloud functionality is great. The version control is great. Kind of all the ways that it takes a lot of weight off the shoulders of the BIM manager in terms of that long-term model maintenance and the things that kind of stress you out about needing to have models maintained over a long period of time with many people accessing them. So there's a good element of security in hosting with ACC. So that would probably be, and it's kind of what everyone's using, you know, as architects and more folks are getting on board with Revit and BIM in the cloud, it seems to be the place to go.
Right. And just for the record, everyone, Sarah was not paid to say that. That was that
Genuine
was on her
opinion.
own free will. And speaking of using, even if it's ACC or a different environment, what have been the unique challenges from your perspective on organizing information like this at the owner level? Right, where you have multiple campuses, you have multiple buildings, you have to take into account the GIS and horizontal information.
Yeah, so that plays a lot back into what I was saying previously about having a good strategy in place before trying to roll out. Because we, even in just the first year of working on this project, we discovered a lot about the way people wanted to interact with these models and with these resources that changed how we wanted to kind of have our whole layout and have our whole database presented to them. So okay.
That makes sense.
I got yeah.
And then are there any other considerations for the connecting that information? So it sounds like you're using it mostly right now to host models. Do you see any sort of additional connectivity that you'll need or information that you might want to store there? For instance, like the GIS stuff, or again, like if you want to connect the models to your other platforms, right? It could be a CMMS platform or an IWMS.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential for connectivity, particularly like the API for Revit and for ACC is super accessible, which makes that connectivity have a lot of potential for how we can kind of hook it up to everything else we're working on. I think especially in terms of, asset management is something that is on the horizon for us, or kind of an asset management strategy. And a lot of the features of ACC and Build in particular, I think can be used for something like that. It's been a really interesting implementation because I think ACC is really built for the AEC side. It's really built to be project based. So I think we have had to do a little bit of negotiation and wiggling to really make it work for owner's side. But I will say that I think Autodesk is very engaged in that endeavor, and so it's my hope that it continues to be a really good resource for owner's side too.
Yeah, there's never, we do a lot of these implementations, and there's you would think there's a lot of crossover, but I'd say on the capital side it's almost always set up the same, but then on the life cycle and operation side it's very unique. Some of our clients will put every single building in a single ACC project. Some will break it up based on campus, some will break it up based on department, right? Because that's where their cost codes are. So it's always very unique to see how it's rolled out on the operations side. And I think moving on, you just touched into the accessibility and the access of the information, again, while you're moving in the routes of common data environments in general. You said one of your main goals was to provide additional visibility and access to as many people as possible. Can you elaborate a little bit more? Like, who is the target audience? Is it internal facing? Is it external facing? Is it just for your own team?
Yeah, so there's really multiple layers kind of like nested inside each other, right? So my team is at the core, the innermost layer, where we kind of want to have access to everything and to manage it as well as we can. Outside that layer is the pref layer and the technology solutions group layer, where they're also kind of tying into that data and utilizing that data and connecting it to other resources to serve their needs. And then beyond that are, the departmental space managers that I mentioned. Operational staff and trades and services is a group that we are really excited to get on board. And then, our GIS team, campus planners, there's so many folks who want to be using this data, and it's a challenge to make it usable for all of them and to give them the resources they need to be able to use these resources. We want everyone to be able to access and to have, the skill set, the technology, the software and hardware that they need to be able to use them.
I forgot to unmute myself there. I think a question came up in the Q&A. I think we're going to be able to answer it live as we go through. When you talk about the visibility, what does that look like? Are they viewing the models? Are they viewing 3D views that you've curated? Is it directly in ACC? Is it in Revit? Is it in another kind of application that is pulling from that using the Forge APIs?
So the goal is, like, for many people, it is very, what they want is very simple. So we use Archibus for a lot of our space management, and currently there's access to lots of floor plans that are just kind of 2D views with room data. You can see the baseline would be replacing those 2D views with maybe 3D cutaway views that just give you a little bit more information about what you're looking at, a little bit more, whether it's hard data like asset data or more soft data like what does the door look like and where is the light switch and things like that. But like, and then assets are a huge other component. This data side is the main feature for a lot of other people who want to be able to click on a room and get a list of all the MEP equipment in that room, or all the recent work orders associated with that room, or something like that. So I think that the goal is to kind of have that Forge style API based viewer access that you can have in a browser or something like that, so that viewability is really not limited and not locked behind licenses, things like that. So it's balancing security of the data with accessibility, right?
Yep.
So the core few would actually be opening the models in Revit, and the majority of people have the opportunity of some kind of a viewer where they can see things more simply and on an iPad or on an iPhone out in the field.
So you think like maybe in the future, if you have your perfect, systems architecture and solution set up, they would still, like, different personas would still be accessing the information in different formats, right? So a technician on site might be accessing it through a enterprise asset management platform, whereas the planners might still be accessing it through Archibus. Do you think that's still valid in the future?
I think so, yes, because I think there are certain programs that we will just never let go of. Things like Archibus, things like eBuilder, our project management software. Like, there are programs that will just always be a part of people's workflows. And so the best thing we can do is to integrate with those resources, and try to avoid data redundancy and just kind of link up everywhere we can so that we're feeding our data into all of their resources, rather than necessarily trying to convince everyone to switch to a whole new system.
Yeah. We see that too. It's hard. There's never one platform that does it all. So that kind of integration of the information and where it lives is, going back to common data environments, we think is extraordinarily important about where that is and what is the middleware, connecting it all. And you touched on it kind of a little bit earlier about having your internal teams looking at the information, and you did bring up the fact that the student body and the actual students are getting a little bit more interested. Do you see this expanding, right, to include the student body or even the community at large, right, whether it be the local township or local government that has a vested stake in Northeastern?
Yeah, I think there are always opportunities there. It's always a question kind of data security and what do you want to be publicly available. I think there are kind of specific opportunities for certain resources to be made available to students, for example. Maybe like an interactive cutaway view of a dorm building when they're going to pick what dorm they'll be living in. So they can, rather than just looking at a floor plan, they get a little idea of the space.
I wish I had that when I was in school.
It'd be very
especially
cool.
a 3D view of it and showing what the lighting looked like.
Right. How many windows does it actually have and things like that.
Yeah.
And
or
then
how
there are
far
other
away
ways.
that window is from the right from the door. It's
Right.
it's quite eye-opening.
Right. Well, and then there are other ways that those resources, I think, can make their way into the community in a way that does not necessarily compromise data privacy, like particularly through GIS resources, locating bike racks and locating like first aid kits. And a lot of kind of
Yeah.
life safety and security is another group that has definitely shown interest in this project. Maps for navigating campus and ways that we can improve things like that, where you could, Google Maps your way right to a classroom. So I think there are opportunities for this to create a backdrop for community assets too.
Nice. And just to kind of wrap up the usability and access, with democratizing this information as we just described, what do you personally hope to gain by making this information more accessible to the larger audience?
I think it's really about it's that I truly believe that this information will make everyone's jobs and lives easier. I think that everyone will be able to do their work more efficiently with these resources available to them. So no more like trying to chase down who is actually occupying that office that no one's been into for 3 years. When was that air handler replaced? Like what kind of AV equipment is in that classroom? And all that kind of time spent chasing things down, tracing out electrical systems in a building. Like I just think there's a lot of opportunity for time saved and effort saved with this kind of data available.
Right. And now let's say for instance, you've got the information, it's available to everybody, and they don't know how to use it. Right. And we see this as kind of the next phase, right? So shifting gears a bit, like how are you going about spreading the good word? Is there an educational program that you've established? Is there outreach? Want to walk us through like how you're actually kind of interacting with the folks who will be using this and supporting them?
Sure. Yeah. So I would say it's two parts. It's promotion and it's also education. So promotion kind of comes first, getting people on board with what we're actually doing and sharing that these resources even exist, that they're available. And then that's kind of at the highest level. You can do that department wide, but then kind of drilling down into the individual groups and understanding what would your use cases be for these products and resources. Like let me show you exactly how what we have will impact what you do, because maybe that high level demonstration at the big meeting didn't really convey to each group how some groups latch right on. Some groups say, I see immediately how that will work for me, but other groups kind of need to ask a few more questions, explore a little bit more, understand how that would actually make their lives easier. And usually after 30 or 45 minutes of looking through stuff together, then they really see it.
Yeah,
But beyond
and
that, yep, go ahead.
well, I was going to say, actually, touching or following up on that, how are you kind of showing this information? Are you opening up Revit and showing them live? Are you going to the Forge view? Are you just printing? Are you, kind of handing them educational presentation material?
I always try to show things live whenever possible, just because I think, clicking around in a model or zooming around a building is the best way to show what you can actually do with this stuff. And me, someone who uses it every day, obviously I'm probably using it more efficiently than a person who's never opened Revit before. But it only shows what they can do. If I just
Right.
threw that program up in front of them, they'd say like, I don't know. I don't have the time to really look through this and figure out what it can do for me. But if I show you, then that's your motivation to come back and figure out how to do that for yourself.
Right. And do you see the balance between, is there a delicate balance between like showing them too much or things that are maybe not quite developed yet or in your roadmap versus things that are concrete and you could do today?
Definitely. So that's back again to that long-term strategy and rollout question. We want to promote what we're doing as much as we can. We want to get people excited about what's on the horizon, but it's really hard to share something and then say, this is what's going to be available in a year.
Right.
You kind of uh, take off, people get really excited, people are invested, and then they kind of lose interest as time goes on and they realize it's not quite available. So it's a really difficult balance of keeping people engaged, but also keeping a practical view of what you can actually make available to them at the time.
Nice. And then when you present this, are you open with your roadmap, or do you try to keep that a little bit closer and say, hey, look, here are some of the exciting things coming, but keep it realistic and grounded just so they're not looking out too far in case the market and trends change?
I think we keep our general roadmap pretty open. We have actually expedited a lot from where we thought this implementation would be. I think we anticipated it taking a lot longer to get the whole campus captured, where that's actually moving pretty quickly, thanks to how our Scan to BIM project has been going. So I think I try to keep a pretty I try to give everyone a pretty good idea of how that's coming along, because it's a very concrete. We will be capturing 10 buildings this year, and then those buildings will be online. So that's very easy to share. The more abstract concepts, like when will we have that common data environment live? That's a little bit harder to put a date on. So those are the kind of things I keep a little bit more vague. Like, we would love to have this in the next year. Kind of keep it far
Yeah.
enough out that
You
you
just might
aren't
not know
totally
what it looks
locked
like
in.
either, so it's hard to kind of promote what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Sarah,
then
what?
lastly, like, oh yeah, keep going.
Sorry, I was just going to say, what was the most exciting building for you to scan, and what group of people was the most excited to have their building scanned?
So it's interesting, actually. Before we even started scanning in Boston, we scanned the entirety of our Oakland campus,
Oh, okay.
which is a fairly recent acquisition out in California. And that's about, I think it was about 1 million square feet. And we did that over a couple weeks last summer, just captured the whole campus.
You hit it
And
hard.
yeah, yeah. And so that was a really great resource, because, if our existing conditions in Boston were here, then the ones in Oakland were here.
Oh
And so
no.
we got to bring them up to here before Boston even got moving, which I think was really great for them. It's an awesome resource for them. It provided a lot of connectivity for me as well, having been based out of Boston my whole life,
Mhm.
to get to know that campus, and then to also promote that new resource and new availability to the other people working in Boston who need to be connected to Oakland but might not know that much about the campus so far. And, you know, thinking about the sign shop, Northeastern has a sign shop who has to make signage for all of the rooms on campus, and they have to make signs for a building they have never walked through, potentially, if it's coming out of Boston. So that for me was the most exciting, because it was a campus I had never been to, and now I have literally opened every single door on that campus by hand.
Nice.
Nice.
So now, I think the last section of the interview, again, continuing with this trend, you've captured it all. You've done the education and training, right? You've done the outreach. You got your dream wish, right? Everything isn't now in 3D across the campuses. What are your concerns at that point, right? What's keeping you up at night in regards to the management of all of this info?
Yeah, it's really just the effort that it takes on my behalf, as well as my entire department, to maintain the data that goes into these models. So for the question of me and myself, it's a question of manpower. I'm currently a team of one. So it's keeping those models up to date based on all the data that's coming into me. But then beyond that, there's the management of all that data that needs to make its way back to me. So I rely a lot on project managers and operations, and we're constantly working with them to improve these workflows of how that data makes it all back to me, so that as we continue to roll this out, nothing gets missed, and everything gets captured. Because the minute a building is scanned, anything that happens in there would be missed if it was not documented. So it starts from day one. You need to have a plan.
And how are you, and again, this is looking into the future, so it might not be all figured out yet, but how are you capturing all that information? Are you funneling it through, work orders? Are people sending you emails? Is it phone calls? Right? Is there a centralized location where you're like, hey, look, here are where the changes are, and here's what needs to happen?
Yeah, so there's two major streams of data coming in. One would be capital projects, and then the other would be the kind of work order, service requests, and maintenance and things like that. So those are kind of the two data streams. Capital projects, we have pretty good systems in place for kind of how I could kind of fit my puzzle piece into that workflow. And as the capital projects wrap up, how I can engage with the project team and make sure that I capture everything that they did as part of the project and get that incorporated. The operational side, is a bit more of a challenge just because they do so much work and they work so quickly. And, they're the ones who keep this campus running day in
Right.
and day out and every night and every snowstorm. And so trying to find a way to work with them to capture all the work that they're doing in a way that doesn't put more work on their shoulders to capture. That's one of the biggest challenges that we're working on right now. And I won't say we have a solution yet because we don't, but that's something that is a huge challenge that we need to figure out. And so we're working with a lot of stakeholders who have ideas, which is great, to hopefully figure out a way to get all of that captured and as soon as we can.
Nice. And I know you mentioned before about the technology. Is there a concern as well about staying ahead of the technology trends? And then as those trends are happening, how do you personally stay up to date, right? Do you read blogs? Do you go to conferences? Right? How do you better inform yourself so that you can inform the campus?
Yeah, so I will say the two best resources that I have found are conferences for one. The CFTA conference in particular is a pretty small and pretty specific conference for campus facilities technology, which is just an amazing experience because it's such a niche that many people can go to a conference for something so specific and just discover really great work that everyone else is doing. And tying into that, and also the other great resource is just speaking to other universities about what they're doing. The really amazing thing about working not just on owner's side but in higher ed is that there isn't really competition in what I do. Universities as a whole have competition, but not university facilities really. And so the
Right.
benefit is we all love to share how we are doing what we're doing and what we're working on and how we've improved over the years. And I have found that other universities are just as willing to also share what they're doing. And that's just an amazing resource. And that lack of competition has really, I think, created an environment where everyone can prosper.
Nice. And then, I kind of to wrap up the interview here, are there any technologies and themes that you see coming down the pipeline that excite you? And do you think when do you think they'll be ready for an enterprise implementation?
Yeah, so the big one I would say is scanning technology. I think that is really improving all the time. And even in just the past 5 or 10 years, the changes that have come about from kind of the scanning of 5 or 10 years ago with the tripod and it's black and white point cloud captures and trying to make that into a model versus what you can do now with mobile LiDAR and SLAM scanning and just the way we're able to capture data and the speed at which we can capture it is making this whole endeavor it's making it go a lot faster than we expected, and it's making it the data that we're getting out of it even more valuable than we could have expected.
Nice. No, we have a little bit of a pick your own adventure here. Sarah, we have a couple of questions that we could answer live, but I just want to be cognizant of the time here. And you also have some case studies that you want to show. So not to put pressure on anybody in the audience or Sarah, do you feel it's important to showcase some of your work, or do you want to hop back into the Q&A, and then again, when we get to the end, we might have to cut some of your videos short?
I definitely want to answer people's questions. I think that's number one priority. The case studies are cool, but it's more just cool stuff we're doing. So let's answer questions
and
first.
we could always extend the video, so people need to hop off. We'll make sure it's recorded as well. So I'm good on time. So yeah, I think the first question that we had, a couple were already answered through the natural course of the interview. One that's popped up is, again, going back to the integration between the different technologies that you have. So how has it been? Are you integrating ACC with eBuilder currently? And if you are, and if you're not, why not? And if you are, how is it going?
So currently we don't have any integration between ACC and eBuilder specifically. I think that eBuilder is really our project management software. It's during projects, and then we're kind of able to create a singular handoff from eBuilder to ACC at project closeout. And just because of kind of the way we have set up our project strategies, we don't necessarily need it to be a back and forth situation. I do think we have the opportunity to use a lot of that eBuilder data in BIM, just kind of project reporting and the kind of the same thing where you're clicking on a room, you want to understand what projects are going on in that room, what's an adjacent project that's happening, and how many capital projects have been in that building over the past 5 years, things like that. So I think we're taking the eBuilder data, the ACC data, and bringing them both up to the next level, but we don't have any direct connections at that time at that level yet.
Makes sense. And I think even furthering on that topic, so you're managing the data eBuilder for your projects. And the last question here is, can you share some more detail about the project closeout process and how you're capturing that project data? Are you capturing asset data in the BIMs? And are you connecting it with any other systems? Like basically how you're round tripping it back to your operational side.
Sure. So this is something that we are currently developing. So I will say that it's a little bit in flux because Symmetry is actually helping us to develop how the best way to do this is.
If anyone needs help, you can you'll find my contact info at the end. Keep going.
So currently at project closeout, we're trying to get this information as soon as we can, but at project closeout, all of the as-builts are collected in eBuilder. We have kind of completed BIM kickoffs at the start of projects, so those teams all understand what our expectations are for deliverables at the end. So they are turning over, whether it's a Revit model or CAD files, kind of depends on the scale and scope of the project, whether we were able to provide a Revit model, which subs are working in Revit. So currently we are pretty flexible with what we expect back, just because we are not fully rolled out in Revit. So we can't really expect everyone else to be fully in Revit either. So it's a little bit, we're kind of like walking in both paths right now, hoping eventually to be fully on the Revit path. So we get all that data, which is as-built mostly, as well as we're working to implement a kind of asset inventory, which while we don't have a full asset management strategy yet, our current intention is at least we're collecting that data and tabularizing it so that when we kind of finalize how that integrates with BIM, we have the data and it's relatively up to date. So our commissioning team plays a big role in collecting that data at project closeout, which is really just, I say data, it's all of the serviceable equipment information that you would want to have in an asset inventory, which we use like a barcoding system for. So it's got the O&M data and the warranty data and serial numbers and all that kind of thing. And then we also are looking to gather room data, which just kind of helps our space management team to get our room resources in Archibus updated as quickly as possible. So all that data comes in. Asset team gets the asset information, space management team gets the room information. I get the BIM information. And currently we just have a manual backlog that all of that data gets updated into our base models and incorporated into the resources that are available to everyone, which is obviously manageable right now, but won't necessarily be forever. So hence why we're working on that as a greater strategy of how we will be able to manage the project data coming in and getting that updated in the BIM models.
And is that commissioning and punch list information being managed in eBuilder as well, or is that done more like spreadsheets or smart sheets or something?
It's more spreadsheets at this time. So I am kind of pushing for maybe using the Autodesk Build, particularly for punch list, as a way to manage that. A lot of our projects are small and they're quick and things are just kind of done in the easiest way that they can be. But I think especially on those big projects, there's definitely potential for a bigger, better strategy there.
Yeah, that's been a challenge as well with with campuses and owners in general. People don't realize that you could have 100 small projects going on that are just being handled by the internal engineering staff, and where does that information, do you spin up a new project? Do you do it in an operational state? So again, it just goes back to having a digital strategy in place, which I think Sarah's done a very good job on, and then kind of rolling that out slowly, and then pivoting where you need to.
Yep.
It looks like we have no more questions. So Sarah, I was gonna go back to the deck that we had prepared, and we're gonna show some additional case studies. So let me just give me a second here to kind of figure out where all my windows are. And then, oh, there we go. Okay. And then Sarah, yeah, I'll just let you narrate over what you want to share.
Sure. Yeah, and I don't have a ton to share on these. It's more just, I think, a cool opportunity to show what we've been up to and what we have been able to capture. And like I was talking about, how scan to BIM and data capture has improved over the past couple decades. So this is an aerial flyover we did of the Oakland campus last year. So this data was able to inform our GIS team and also has actually been quite beneficial. You see, I zoom in on the roof here. Just being able to see what's on the roofs of buildings is a hugely valuable asset, especially when you can't necessarily be there in person. So this combined with the internal building scans has been a really great resource to kind of bring the picture of the whole campus together.
And how was this information captured? Was it a series of drones? Was it Google Map and available GIS info?
No, this was from a drone flight that we did.
Nice. And then I think we're going to showcase another. This is now an interior view, right? So walk us through, are these 360 stills? Was it all done in the same using the same technology?
So this is captured at the same time as our point cloud data is captured, and this is kind of what I was talking about, those improvements in the scan capture. These walkthroughs have been a resource that people really appreciate and love, particularly those folks like the sign shop. Just being able to zoom around in a building and see room numbers and kind of what's going on without having to, this is in a browser. You can just do this essentially like a Google Street View. So I think
yeah, and actually that's a good point there. If it's in a browser, that means you can basically you can invite anybody to this, right? And so who right now is it again is it internal to Northeastern, or are you kind of showcasing this out to the general public?
This is currently an internal resource. I think the hope is to make things like this available, but it's always that question of data privacy and security. But definitely, at least across the university, we're hoping to make this available because especially with the prevalence of remote work now, it's super useful to be able to walk through a building without having to be there in person.
Right. And this technology exploded, I think, it's always been around, but I think during COVID really pushed, I think cloud technologies in general and these walkthroughs in general really push people to say, it's so costly to get on site. Like, do we really need to go? Kind of goes back to that. Could this meeting have been an email, right? Just kind of that time saving. One quick question that came up on this was, what technology are we looking at here? I know these are 360 images, but is it being hosted in like a specific like Hollow Builder or Cintu type environment?
Yeah, so this is a Naviz Ivion is the service. So the Naviz VLX is the scanner that we use to capture it. And then Ivion is the host that just takes all that photogrammetry and puts together this nice, clickable, measurable data set.
Yeah, that post-processing is, people always forget that it takes some time. You have to collect it all together. And I think you had just one more slide you wanted to share, right? I think this shows the exterior of your buildings and the detail that's put into it.
Yeah, this is really just kind of, I thought, a fun thing to end on. Because on the left is one of the Mills Hall specifically, which is a historical building, and you really get a feel for the building even just looking at this digital model, and you can kind of imagine things like promotional resources and stuff where you want to see like the beauty of a building. And then compared to the other side, which is just the gnarly, grainy MEP that you can capture with these scans, that is just a huge, huge wealth of knowledge to the right people.
Nice. All right, so we're gonna move on a bit. I know we're a little behind schedule here, but again, we'll keep it running. So we're gonna open this up for an open forum. I believe we've gotten through most of the Q&A. So the Q&A will be open. If there's any other follow-up questions that people have, please drop them into the chat and we could keep answering them live. But moving on from that, we collected information from Sarah at the beginning of this interview process, or actually weeks ago, right, to help shape the direction it went. And we do have that survey is still live, and we'd like to invite the people who are watching this live or the people who are watching this this recording in the future to weigh in, right? It's really good. You'll see the results. We'll keep publishing results as we get more and more info, but it's good. It's really interesting to see how each campus, what they're interested in at the moment. I think one thing I brought out that was interesting when we were discussing this with Sarah is that sometimes the priority might be very low because the campus has already done it, right? So maybe creating digital twins is low because they've already done one already. So it's interesting, to have follow-up questions to see why certain things are lower on the scale than certain things are higher, right? Just based on campus needs. So I'll leave this up for just another moment. And then the last couple slides is I wanted to showcase how to get involved. So Sarah mentioned, talking to other universities is where she gains some of the best info. Autodesk actually has a really great peer exchange for universities. So if you're not quite sure who to reach out to or which universities are even in your local area that are interested in this, Tara has a really great series that she puts together. The next one is going to be on Thursday and June 20th. And if you scan that code on the bottom right, it'll actually take you to the landing page for that series. And then on the left, if you want to reach out to Tara directly, that's her direct LinkedIn contact info. So I'll leave this up for just a second. And then the last slide is really, if you have any questions for the panelists, myself, Sarah, Rachel, our information is again on the QR code. So feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to help you. Symmetry's contact info is on the left if you want to reach out to Symmetry for anything. And yeah, that's all we had. So I'll leave this page up, and if there's any other questions, if anyone wants to interject with their, whatever they want to say, I've got a few more minutes.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick, and thanks, Rachel, for hosting.
Of course. Thanks for joining, Sarah. We really appreciate it.
Happy to.
Yep, you're welcome, Lynn. All right, I'm going to stop the recording, and thanks everyone for joining. And yeah, please reach out if there's anything else we can help with.
Thanks, everybody.